The thunderous sound of a distant storm rolled across the plains as Olivia Reed stood motionless by the freshly dug grave, her arms cradling a bundle wrapped in a pale blue blanket. Tears streamed down her dust-stained cheeks, mingling with the raindrops that had begun to fall from the darkening Montana sky. 3 days ago, her husband Thomas had succumbed to a fever that swept through their small homestead with merciless speed. Now she was alone with their 2-month-old son, miles from the nearest town, with winter approaching and little more than grief to keep her company. The wind picked up, whistling through the tall grass surrounding the simple wooden cross she had fashioned with her own hands. Olivia pulled the blanket tighter around her baby, protecting him from the elements as her shoulders shook with silent sobs. The vast emptiness of the Montana Territory in 1876 had never felt more overwhelming. She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats until they were nearly upon her. Startled, Olivia turned to see a man on horseback emerging from the mist that had begun to settle across the plains. His broad-shouldered silhouette was unmistakably that of a cowboy, with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the rain. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. "Madam," he said, removing his hat in respect as he approached the grave site. His voice was deep but gentle, like distant thunder without the threat. "Forgive the intrusion. I was passing through when I saw the smoke from your chimney had gone out. Thought I'd check if everything was all right." Olivia couldn't find words, her throat tight with emotion. The baby in her arms squirmed and let out a small cry. The cowboy's eyes, a startling blue against his sun-weathered face, moved from the fresh grave to the infant and then to Olivia's tear-streaked face. Understanding dawned in his expression. "You're not alone anymore," he said simply, his voice carrying a certainty that made her want to believe him. "Name's Finn Porter. I work cattle for the Double R Ranch about 20 miles east. Let me help you get back to shelter before this storm breaks proper." Olivia hesitated, years of frontier caution warring with desperate need. Another gust of wind, colder now, made the decision for her as the baby started to cry in earnest. "Olivia Reed," she managed, her voice barely audible above the gathering storm. "This is my son, James," Finn nodded, replacing his hat. "Mrs. Reed, you and your boy need to get inside. Whatever decisions need making can wait until you're warm and dry." The practicality of his words penetrated her grief-fogged mind. She nodded once, allowing him to gently guide her away from her husband's grave. As they walked toward the small cabin visible in the distance, Olivia cast one last glance over her shoulder at the lonely marker on the hill, wondering what kind of woman she would be when she next stood in this place. Finn's horse followed obediently behind as they made their way through the drizzling rain to the modest log cabin Thomas had built with such pride just a year earlier. Their homestead was simple, but solid, a testament to her husband's skill and determination. Now it felt like a monument to shattered dreams. "You've got a good piece of land here," Finn commented as they approached. "Good water source, decent grazing." "Thomas chose it," Olivia replied, her voice still thick with emotion. "Said we could raise a family here, build something lasting." Finn nodded respectfully, but said nothing more as they reached the cabin. He pushed open the door and quickly set about rekindling the fire that had died to embers in the small stone hearth. His movements were efficient and practiced, speaking of years spent making camp in all manner of conditions. "How long has it been since you've eaten properly, Mrs. Reed?" he asked without looking up from his task. Olivia sank into the rocking chair, suddenly aware of the hollow ache in her stomach. She couldn't remember. The days since Thomas fell ill had blurred together in a haze of worry, then grief. "I'm fine," she said automatically. The fire caught, sending a warm glow through the one-room cabin. Finn straightened and turned to face her, his expression kind but firm. "No disrespect intended, madam, but you won't be much good to that little one if you don't take care of yourself." He gestured toward the baby now sleeping in her arms. "I noticed you've got some chickens out back and what looks like a vegetable patch. With your permission, I could fix something up." Olivia wanted to refuse to send this stranger on his way. Pride demanded it. Practicality, however, whispered that she needed help at least for tonight. Tomorrow she could figure out what to do next. There are eggs, she conceded, and some potatoes in the root cellar beneath the floorboards by the stove. Finn nodded and set to work with surprising competence for a cowhand. As he moved around the small space, Olivia studied him surreptitiously. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 28 or 30 to her 23 years. His dark hair curled damply at his collar, and despite his trail-worn clothes, there was a certain dignity in his bearing. Most striking were his hands, strong and calloused from work, yet remarkably gentle as they cracked eggs and sliced potatoes. Outside, the storm finally broke in earnest, rain lashing against the small windows and wind howling around the cabin's corners. Olivia found herself grateful for the cowboy's timely appearance, though guilt immediately followed the thought. Thomas was barely cold in his grave, and here she was taking comfort in another man's presence. "My husband," she said suddenly, needing to speak of him to keep his memory present. "He took sick just over a week ago, a fever. I tried everything willow bark tea, cold compresses, prayer." Nothing helped. Finn turned from the stove, his expression solemn. "Mountain fever claims many out here, Mrs. Reed. Good men and women both. It's not your fault." The simple absolution in his words loosened something tight in her chest. She hadn't realized how heavily the weight of failure had been pressing on her. "He was a good man," she said softly. "We were married just a year and a half. James was born in August." Finn nodded. "How long have you been out here?" "We came west last spring." Thomas had a dream of building something of our own, away from his family's shipping business in Boston. I thought he was mad at first. A faint smile touched her lips at the memory. But he had such conviction, such certainty that this was where we belonged. "And you, Mrs. Reed? Did you come to share his dream?" The question caught her off guard with its perception. "I came because I loved him," she answered honestly. "The dream was always his. I just wanted to be where he was." The confession hung in the air between them as Finn served up a simple but hearty meal of fried potatoes and eggs. Olivia ate mechanically at first, then with increasing appetite as her body reminded her of its needs. The baby stirred in the small cradle she had placed him in, and Finn surprised her by gently rocking it with his foot while she finished her meal. "You have children, Mr. Porter?" she asked. A shadow crossed his features. "No, madam, never been blessed that way." He paused, then added, "Had younger siblings, though, 5 of them. I remember the rocking." There was a story there, Olivia sensed, but it wasn't her place to pry. Instead, she finished her food and then took James from his cradle when he began to fuss, turning slightly away to nurse him discreetly. Finn busied himself washing the few dishes, his back considerately turned. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully measured. "Mrs. Reed, I don't mean to overstep, but your situation here is precarious. Winter's coming on, and this is no place for a woman and infant alone." Olivia's spine stiffened. "This is my home, Mr. Porter. My husband built it with his own hands." "I understand that," he said gently. "But practicalities must be considered. The nearest town is 15 miles. The winter here can be brutal. You've got a baby to think of." She knew he was right, which only made his words sting more. "What would you suggest?" she asked, a defensive edge to her voice. "That I abandon my husband's dream, return east in defeat." Finn turned to face her, his expression serious. "Not necessarily. There are options. You could winter in town, return in the spring, or hire help to maintain the place until you decide what you want long term." "With what money?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "Thomas invested everything in this land. We were counting on the harvest next year to see us through." Finn was quiet for a moment, considering. Outside, the storm continued to rage, emphasizing the fragility of her position. "The Double R is always looking for good cooks for the bunkhouse," he finally said. "The owner, Mrs. Blackwood, is a fair woman. She might have a position that would let you keep your boy with you. It's honest work, and you could save something to return here if that's what you decide." Olivia's first instinct was to refuse outright, cook for a bunkhouse full of cowhands. It seemed a far cry from the life she'd imagined. But as James finished nursing and settled contentedly against her shoulder, reality reasserted itself. What choice did she really have? Her supplies would last perhaps a month if she was careful. After that, "I'll consider it," she said finally, her voice small in the cabin that suddenly felt too empty and too large at once. Finn nodded, accepting her answer without pushing further. "Storms set in for the night," he observed. "With your permission, I'll bed down in the barn. Come morning, we can talk more." Gratitude and wariness warred within her. She barely knew this man, yet here he was, offering help when she most needed it. Thomas would want her to be cautious, but he would also want her to survive. "There's clean hay in the loft," she said by way of agreement. Finn gathered his hat and coat. "You bolt this door behind me, Mrs. Reed. I'll be close if you need anything." After he left, Olivia secured the door as instructed and prepared for bed, going through the motions automatically while her mind raced with uncertainty. She laid James in his cradle, then knelt beside her bed to pray something she had done faithfully every night since childhood. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't understand your ways. I don't know why you've taken Thomas from us, but I ask for guidance now. Show me the path forward for James' sake, if not my own." She climbed into the bed she had shared with Thomas, the emptiness beside her a physical ache. Outside, the storm howled its fury, but somehow knowing Finn Porter was nearby in the barn made it less frightening. She fell asleep to the rhythm of the rain, exhaustion finally claiming her. Morning brought clear skies and difficult decisions. Olivia rose with the dawn, as had been her habit since coming west. James was still sleeping peacefully, so she tended to her few animals, first the chickens that provided eggs, the milk cow Thomas had traded for last spring, and the sturdy mare he had used for plowing. She was just finishing when Finn emerged from the barn, looking remarkably put together for a man who had spent the night on hay. He'd clearly made use of the pump outside, as his face was freshly washed and his dark hair slicked back with water. "Morning, Mrs. Reed," he called, keeping a respectful distance. "Your cow gives good milk. I took the liberty of filling the pail." Olivia nodded her thanks, suddenly self-conscious of her own appearance. She hadn't properly looked in a mirror since Thomas fell ill, and she suspected she looked every bit as worn and haggard as she felt. "There's coffee inside," she offered, "and I can cook something." Over a breakfast of cornbread and more eggs, they discussed options with the practical directness of people accustomed to frontier life. Finn laid out what he knew of opportunities in the nearby town of Mill Creek and at the various ranches in the area. "The thing is," he explained, "most places aren't looking to take on a woman with a baby, not for the kind of work that's available. But Mrs. Blackwood, she's different. Lost her husband 10 years back, runs the Double R entirely on her own now. She's got a reputation for helping folks who need it, especially women in tight spots." Olivia considered this. "And you think she'd have a place for me?" "I can't promise, but I think it's worth asking. We're short a cook since old Pete moved on last month, and the hands are getting mighty tired of taking turns at the stove." He smiled slightly. "Last night's supper was the best meal I've had in weeks. Simple as it was, you've got a knack." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "I'll need time to gather my things and decide what to do about the animals. Cattle drives just ended for the season, so I can spare a few days," Finn offered. "Help you close up proper, bring along what you need, find homes for what you can't take." It was decided then. Olivia would ride to the Double R with Finn to seek employment with Mrs. Blackwood, at least through the winter. If it didn't work out, they would continue to Mill Creek, where the local minister might know of other opportunities. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Olivia sorted through their possessions, packing only what was essential and what held sentimental value. Finn repaired a broken shutter, ensured the roof was secure, and helped her preserve what food couldn't travel. They agreed that the chickens could be left with enough feed to last until she could send someone back for them, and Finn arranged with a neighboring homesteader to check on them occasionally. On the morning of their departure, Olivia insisted on visiting Thomas's grave one last time. She stood there in the crisp autumn air, James bundled against her chest, and made a silent promise to return in the spring if at all possible. Ready, Mrs. Reed? Finn called softly from where he waited with the horses. Yes, she said, turning away from the grave with newfound resolve. And please call me Olivia. If we're to be traveling together, formality seems unnecessary. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Olivia, then, he agreed, helping her mount the mare while carefully supporting James. They set out across the rolling plains, Finn leading the way on his gelding with Olivia's mare on a lead rope behind him. The journey would take most of a day, and they planned to make camp once before reaching the Double R the following afternoon. As they rode, Finn proved to be an unexpectedly good conversationalist. He told her about the territory, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the land's history. Some tales were clearly meant to distract her from her grief, making her smile despite herself. Others were practical lessons about survival in this untamed country. How did you come to be a cowhand? Olivia asked during a brief rest to water the horses and tend to James. Finn leaned against a sun-warmed rock, his hat pushed back. Wasn't planned. My father was a blacksmith in Missouri. I was meant to follow him into the trade, but when the war came, everything changed. The war. Even now, 11 years after its end, its shadow stretched long across the country. You fought, she asked softly. He nodded once, eyes distant. Union cavalry, joined up in '63, just turned 18. By the time I came home in '65, my father had passed from pneumonia and my mother was struggling with 5 young ones. I took what work I could find, eventually signed on with a cattle drive heading west. He shrugged slightly. Been riding the range ever since. And your family? Olivia asked, sensing there was more to the story. A flash of old pain crossed his features. Mother remarried in '68. Good man, owned a general store in Springfield. My siblings are grown or nearly so now. I send money when I can, visit when the trail takes me close enough. Olivia recognized the mixture of duty and displacement in his voice. Like many men who had gone to war as boys and returned as something else entirely, Finn Porter seemed to belong nowhere and everywhere. What about you? He asked, clearly ready to change the subject. How does a Boston lady end up homesteading in Montana territory? Olivia smiled faintly, adjusting James against her shoulder. I wasn't always a Boston lady. I grew up in Pennsylvania, daughter of a schoolteacher. My mother died when I was 16, and I went to live with an aunt in Boston. That's where I met Thomas. He was delivering some papers to my uncle's law office. The memory was bittersweet now. He was so different from the other young men I knew. They were all concerned with business and society, but Thomas wanted adventure. He talked about the West like it was the promised land. And you followed his star, Finn observed. I did. She looked out at the vast landscape surrounding them, so different from the crowded streets of Boston or even the ordered farmland of her childhood. I never expected to love it here, but I do. The openness, the honesty of the land, even with its hardships, Finn nodded in understanding. Gets in your blood, doesn't it? Makes other places seem too confined. Yes, Olivia agreed, surprised by his perception. Exactly that. They continued their journey, the conversation flowing more easily now. By the time they made camp that evening in a sheltered hollow beside a small creek, Olivia found herself genuinely comfortable in Finn's presence. He was unfailingly respectful, never presuming or overstepping, yet there was an ease between them that defied their short acquaintance. As darkness fell, Finn built a small fire and prepared a simple supper from their provisions. James was fussier than usual, perhaps sensing his mother's underlying tension about their uncertain future. May I? Finn asked, gesturing toward the squirming infant after they had eaten. Hesitantly, Olivia handed James to him. To her surprise, the cowboy held the baby with confident gentleness, speaking to him in a low, soothing voice. Within minutes, James had quieted, his tiny hand wrapped around Finn's finger. You have a way with him, Olivia observed, struck by the incongruous image of the trail-hardened cowboy cradling her son so tenderly. Finn smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his weather-beaten face. Babies are good judges of character, or so my mother always said. This little fellow's just trying to figure out who I am. And who are you, Finn Porter? The question slipped out before she could consider its impropriety. He looked up, firelight reflecting in his eyes. For a moment she thought he might deflect with humor or change the subject. Instead, he answered with unexpected candor. Most days, I'm not entirely sure anymore. A drifter with occasional purpose, I suppose, loyal to those who have earned it, trying to do right by the code I was raised on, even when the world doesn't make that easy. He gently handed James back to her. Nothing special or remarkable, madam, just a man making his way. The honesty in his assessment touched her deeply. I think you sell yourself short, Mr. Porter. Finn, he corrected softly, if I'm to call you Olivia. Finn, she agreed, their eyes meeting briefly across the fire before she looked away, disconcerted by the warmth that flooded through her. They retired soon after, Olivia and James in the small tent Finn had packed while he slept under the stars nearby. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive as she contemplated the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had been nursing her dying husband. Now she was traveling across the territory with a man she barely knew, seeking work on a cattle ranch. What would her proper Boston relations think of her now? The thought brought a surprising bubble of inappropriate laughter that she quickly suppressed. What did it matter what they thought? They were 1,000 miles and a lifetime away. Here, survival was what mattered, her survival and that of her son. With that resolution firmly in mind, she finally drifted to sleep. The distant sound of Finn's soft humming to his horse the last thing she remembered. They reached the Double R Ranch the following afternoon. It was larger than Olivia had expected, a sprawling operation with a main house, bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings spread across a valley backed by distant mountains. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures, and several men were visible working with horses in a corral near the barn. Mrs. Blackwood built all this? Olivia asked, impressed despite her nervousness. Her and her husband started it, Finn explained as they approached. After he passed, most folks expected her to sell up and move back east. Instead, she dug in her heels and expanded. Ranch runs nearly 10,000 head now, with 20 regular hands and more seasonal workers during roundup and drives. He guided them toward the main house, a substantial 2-story structure built of logs and local stone. Before they reached it, the front door opened, and a woman emerged onto the porch, even at a distance. Regina Blackwood commanded attention. Tall and straight-backed despite being well into her 50s, she wore practical riding clothes rather than a dress. Her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense braid. As they drew closer, Olivia could see keen intelligence in her lined face and a directness in her gaze that was both intimidating and reassuring. Porter, she called, her voice carrying clearly. Wondered when you'd drift back. Drive went well, I take it. Yes, madam, Finn replied, dismounting and helping Olivia down with James. Cattle arrived in good condition, price was fair. Mrs. Blackwood's sharp eyes took in Olivia and the baby, her expression revealing nothing. And you've brought guests. This is Mrs. Olivia Reed and her son, James, Finn said formally. Mrs. Reed was recently widowed. I came across her place on my way back and thought you might have a position for her, given our need for a cook. The ranch owner descended the steps with surprising grace for a woman her age, coming to stand directly before Olivia. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Reed, she said, her tone gentler than her appearance suggested. Recently, you say? Just over a week ago, Olivia replied, meeting the older woman's gaze steadily. My husband took the mountain fever. Mrs. Blackwood nodded, her expression softening further. A hard way to lose someone, and now you find yourself alone with a child and winter approaching. Yes, madam. Can you cook for 20 hungry men who'll complain if the coffee's weak and the biscuits are hard? The blunt question caught Olivia off guard, but she appreciated the straightforward approach. I can learn what I don't already know. I'm not afraid of hard work. A hint of approval flickered in Mrs. Blackwood's eyes. And the baby, he'd need minding while you work. I can manage, Olivia said with more confidence than she felt. He's a good baby and I'm used to working with him nearby. Mrs. Blackwood studied her for another long moment, then nodded once. We'll try it for a month. If it works for both of us, we'll discuss more permanent arrangements. She turned toward the house. "Come inside. You look dead on your feet, and that little one could use a proper roof over his head." Relief flooded through Olivia. She glanced at Finn, who gave her an encouraging nod before turning to tend to the horses. "Thank you, Mr. Porter," she called after him, "for everything." He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "My pleasure, Mrs. Reed. I'll see you at supper, I expect." Mrs. Blackwood led Olivia into the main house, which was surprisingly comfortable inside despite its frontier setting. A large central room served as both dining area and parlor, with several doors leading to what Olivia presumed were bedrooms and a kitchen. "You and the baby will stay here in the main house," Mrs. Blackwood explained, leading her to a small but clean bedroom off the main room. "Kitchen's through there. Bunkhouse is separate. You'll cook there during the day, but you don't live there." "I don't hold with having a woman sleeping anywhere near 20 cowhands, no matter how well behaved they mostly are." Olivia set James down on the bed, relief washing over her at the simple comfort of a real mattress and solid walls. "I'm grateful for your kindness, Mrs. Blackwood." The older woman waved away her thanks. "Finn Porter doesn't often ask favors or bring strays to my door. When he does, I listen. He's got good judgment about people." She paused, giving Olivia a measuring look. "Rest today. Tomorrow's soon enough to start work." With that, she left Olivia to settle in. Exhaustion overcame her as soon as the door closed, and after feeding James and changing him into clean clothes, she lay down beside him on the narrow bed and fell into the deepest sleep she'd had since Thomas first took ill. She awoke to fading daylight and the sound of male voices from outside. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in her cabin and it was Thomas speaking with a neighbor. Then reality reasserted itself and she remembered where she was. James was still sleeping soundly, so she took the opportunity to wash her face and tidy her appearance before venturing out. In the main room, she found Mrs. Blackwood seated at a large table reviewing what appeared to be ledger books. "Ah, you're up," the older woman noted without looking up. "Supper's in half an hour in the bunkhouse. Nothing fancy tonight. One of the hands is cooking. Tomorrow you can see what supplies we have and what you might need." "I'd like to help tonight," Olivia offered. "To observe, at least, Mrs." Blackwood finally looked up, a hint of approval in her expression. "Eager to start. Good, but what about the baby? He'll sleep a while longer, if you wouldn't mind listening for him." "Bring him here," Mrs. Blackwood decided, closing her ledger. "I'll mind him while you get your bearings in the kitchen." Surprised but grateful, Olivia did as suggested. As she placed James in the makeshift nest of blankets Mrs. Blackwood arranged on a nearby settee, she noticed the older woman's expression soften as she gazed at the sleeping infant. "Been some years since we had a baby at Double R," she said quietly. "My son's boy visits sometimes, but they're based in Denver now. He's nearly 10. Olivia hadn't expected this glimpse of the seemingly formidable ranch owner's personal life. "You have family then?" "A son, his wife." "My grandson." Mrs. Blackwood's tone was matter-of-fact, but Olivia sensed a complex history behind the simple statement. "Go on now. Bunkhouse is the long building to the right of the barn. You can't miss it." The bunkhouse was indeed easy to find, and Olivia entered somewhat hesitantly, immediately aware of being the only woman in a space filled with men. Conversation died as heads turned toward her. Finn rose from a bench near the far wall, crossing to meet her. "Mrs. Reed," he greeted her formally, though his eyes conveyed a warmer welcome. "Come to inspect your new domain." Grateful for his easy manner, she smiled. "To observe tonight, I start officially tomorrow." A collective murmur of approval rippled through the room. Clearly, the current cook was not highly regarded. "Boys, this is Mrs. Reed," Finn announced to the room at large. "She'll be taking over the cooking starting tomorrow, so mind your manners and your language." There were nods all around and a few touched hat brims in greeting. Olivia was struck by the range of men present, some as young as 18 or 19, others with gray in their beards and the weathered look of decades on the range. All shared the lean, tough build of men who spent their days in the saddle. "Kitchen's through here," Finn said, guiding her toward a door at the end of the long room. "Not fancy, but serviceable." The kitchen was indeed basic but clean and well equipped by frontier standards. A large wood stove dominated one wall, with a work table in the center and shelves of supplies lining another wall. A gangly young man with sandy hair was frantically stirring something in a large pot, looking relieved when he saw them enter. "Oh, thank the Lord," he exclaimed. "Are you the new cook? Please say you are and that you can save whatever this is supposed to be." Olivia couldn't help laughing at his desperate expression. "I am, but not until tomorrow. What are you making?" "It was meant to be stew," the young man admitted, stepping back from the pot. "But something's not right." Finn peered into the pot and winced. "What did you put in there, Billy?" "Beef, potatoes, carrots, the usual, and some of those herbs from the garden shed." "Which herbs?" Olivia asked, already suspecting the problem. Billy shrugged helplessly. "The green ones, in the jar with no label." Finn and Olivia exchanged glances, and she stepped forward to take the wooden spoon from the young cowhand's hand. "Let me see what I can do." After a quick assessment, Olivia determined that Billy had mistaken a jar of dried mint for the sage typically used in stew. The combination with beef was unusual, to say the least. But rather than starting over and wasting food, she set about adjusting the seasonings and adding a few ingredients to balance the unexpected mint flavor. The men watched with unconcealed interest as she worked, especially when she began adding small amounts of honey and vinegar to the pot. "What are you doing?" Billy asked, fascinated. "Making mint work with beef," Olivia explained, tasting the modified stew carefully. "It's not traditional, but it can be done if you balance it properly." By the time she called the men to supper, the stew had been transformed into something unusual but decidedly palatable. The cowhands approached warily, but after the first few brave souls declared it not half bad, tucked in with typical cowboy appetite. Finn caught Olivia's eye from across the room and raised his tin cup in a silent toast. The simple gesture of approval warmed her unexpectedly, and she ducked her head to hide the flush she could feel rising in her cheeks. After supper, Finn walked her back to the main house in the gathering darkness. "That was impressive," he commented. "Most would have thrown it out and started fresh." "Food's too precious out here to waste," Olivia replied practically. "Besides, I like a challenge." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments before Finn spoke again. "I'll be heading out tomorrow, trail boss for a small herd going to the railroad at Miles City." Disappointment stabbed through her with surprising sharpness. "Oh, I see. Should be back in 3 weeks or so," he added, glancing at her sideways. "Weather permitting." Olivia nodded, unsure why this information affected her so strongly. After all, Finn Porter was merely a kind stranger who had helped her in a difficult moment. She had no claim on his time or presence. "Well then," she said as they reached the porch of the main house, "I wish you safe travels, Mr. Porter." "Finn," he reminded her gently, "and thank you, Olivia. I'll look forward to a proper meal when I return." Their eyes met in the soft glow spilling from the house windows. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of the unusual connection that had formed in their brief acquaintance. "Godspeed, Finn," she said softly, before turning to enter the house, her heart beating oddly fast for a widow of barely 2 weeks. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and hard work. Olivia quickly settled into her role as cook for the Double R, rising before dawn to begin breakfast preparations and working until after supper was cleared. The men were appreciative of her cooking, and she found unexpected satisfaction in the simple act of providing nourishing food for hard-working people. Mrs. Blackwood Regina, as she insisted Olivia call her after the first week, proved to be a fair employer and gradually something approaching a friend. The older woman's gruff exterior concealed a compassionate nature, particularly when it came to James. To Olivia's surprise, Regina often offered to mind the baby while she worked, claiming it gave her a welcome break from ledgers and ranch business. "You remind me of myself at your age," Regina commented one evening as they sat by the fire after the day's work was done. "Thrown into circumstances you never expected, making the best of it." Olivia looked up from her mending, curious. How did you come to run a cattle ranch? It's unusual for a woman, especially out here. Regina's weathered face softened with memory. I married Harold Blackwood in '48 back in St. Louis. He had dreams of cattle and open ranges, just like your Thomas had dreams of homesteading. We came out here in '52 when there was nothing but wilderness and promise. She paused, running a hand over a worn quilt that lay across her lap. Built everything from the ground up. When the influenza took him in '66, everyone expected me to sell out and go back east. My own son included. But you stayed, Olivia observed. This was our dream, Regina said simply. And I discovered it had become mine as much as his. My son chose a different path, banking in Denver. That's his right. But this land, these cattle, this life, it's in my blood now. Olivia understood completely. Despite the hardships and the tragedy that had marked her brief time in Montana territory, she too had come to love the land and its wild beauty. Do you think you'll return to your homestead in the spring? Regina asked, the question seemingly casual though her sharp eyes were anything but. I don't know, Olivia admitted. Part of me feels I should to honor Thomas's dream, but another part wonders if it's practical for James and me alone. Regina nodded thoughtfully. No need to decide now. Winter's barely begun, and you've a place here as long as you need it. The conversation shifted to more immediate concerns, but Olivia found herself contemplating her future with new clarity. She was still young, still capable of building a life perhaps not the one she had envisioned with Thomas, but a good one nonetheless. As promised, Finn and his small crew returned from Miles City 3 weeks later, riding in just ahead of the first substantial snowfall of the season. Olivia told herself the flutter in her stomach when she saw him dismounting in the yard was merely the excitement of seeing a familiar face, nothing more. That evening, after preparing a hearty welcome-home supper for the returning men, she was wiping down the bunkhouse tables when Finn appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. Heard you've been making quite an impression, he said by way of greeting. Big Dan says he's gained 10 pounds since you took over the cooking. Olivia smiled, pleased by the simple compliment. How was your journey? Cold, dusty, successful? He stepped fully into the room, closing the door against the biting wind outside. Cattle fetched a good price, which means everyone gets a bonus before Christmas. That's wonderful news. A slightly awkward silence fell between them. Olivia became acutely aware of her work-reddened hands and loose tendrils of hair that had escaped her practical bun. Finn looked trail-worn but somehow more handsome than she remembered, his blue eyes vivid against his wind-burned face. And James, he asked, breaking the silence. How is the little fellow? Thriving, Olivia replied, grateful for the safe topic. He's growing so fast. Already trying to roll over. I'd like to see him if that's permitted, Finn said carefully. The formal request reminded Olivia of her precarious position, a young widow whose husband was barely a month in his grave, alone in a room with an unmarried man. Yet the genuine interest in his voice made it impossible to refuse. Of course, she said. He's with Regina in the main house. I was just finishing up here. They walked side by side through the snowy yard, close but not touching. Olivia was intensely conscious of Finn's presence, the solid reliability of him, the quiet strength he emanated without effort. Regina says you've taken to ranch life well, he commented. It suits me better than I expected, Olivia admitted. There's a directness to life here that I find appealing after Boston's social constraints. Finn nodded in understanding. The West has a way of stripping things down to what matters, no room for pretense when survival's at stake. In the main house, they found Regina rocking James by the fire while reviewing ranch accounts, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She looked up as they entered, her keen eyes noting their arrival together with interest but without comment. Porter, she greeted him. Heard the drive went well. Yes, madam, prices were strong. Good, we'll discuss details tomorrow. She rose, carefully transferring the sleeping James to Olivia's arms. I'll turn in. It's been a long day, and these old bones feel every year of their age when the snow comes. After Regina retired to her bedroom, Olivia sat in the rocker with James while Finn took a seat nearby. In the warm glow of the fire, with snow falling softly outside the windows, there was an unexpected intimacy to the moment. "He looks like you," Finn observed, watching the baby sleep. "Same shape to his eyes." Olivia studied her son's peaceful face. "Everyone says he has Thomas's chin, but I can't quite see it." "Did you love him very much?" Finn asked suddenly, then looked immediately regretful. "Forgive me, that's not my place to ask," but Olivia didn't take offense. The genuine interest in his voice made the personal question feel natural rather than intrusive. "I did," she answered honestly. "Though perhaps not in the way of storybook romances, we were well matched in temperament and goals. He was kind, hardworking, and he believed in me." She paused, considering. "Love grew from respect and shared purpose rather than from passion. Does that make sense?" Finn nodded slowly. "More sense than you might think. Seems a solid foundation for a marriage." "It was," Olivia agreed. "But now I must build something new for James's sake if not my own." She looked up, meeting Finn's gaze directly. "What about you? Has there ever been someone special?" A shadow crossed his features. "Once. A long time ago, before the war, Mary Calhoun, daughter of a neighboring farmer." He smiled faintly at the memory. "We had plans, but then the fighting started. By the time I came home, she'd married my cousin Robert. They've got 4 children now, last I heard." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. Finn shrugged, but there was old pain in the gesture. "It worked out as it should. Robert didn't go to war bad lungs since childhood. He was there when she needed someone. I wasn't." He looked toward the window, where snow continued to fall. "Life on the trail isn't conducive to building anything lasting. I've made my peace with that." Something in his tone suggested the peace was hard-won and perhaps still fragile. Olivia found herself wanting to reach out to offer some comfort for wounds long scarred over but still tender. "Yet you helped me," she said instead. "A stranger with a baby and a fresh grave." "You could have ridden past." Finn's gaze returned to her, something unreadable in his expression. "Some things a man can't ride past, no matter how long he's been on the trail." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities that neither was ready to acknowledge. Finally, Finn stood, reaching for his hat. "I should let you rest," he said, his voice returning to its usual practical tone. "It's been a long day." Olivia nodded, rising as well with James still sleeping in her arms. "Good night, Finn. I'm glad you returned safely." "Good night, Olivia," he replied softly before stepping out into the snowy night. As winter settled fully over the Montana territory, life at the Double R fell into a comfortable routine. The heavy snows made cattle driving impossible, so the ranch hands focused on maintaining the buildings, caring for the stock closest to the home range, and preparing for spring roundup. Finn, as one of Mrs. Blackwood's most trusted hands, spent much of his time at the ranch rather than on the trail. Olivia found herself looking forward to the evenings when Finn would often join her and Regina in the main house after supper. Sometimes they played cards or simply talked while Olivia mended clothes and Regina worked on ranch accounts. James, now nearly 5 months old, became increasingly alert and responsive, especially to Finn's deep voice and gentle teasing. Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive atmosphere despite the isolation. The bunkhouse was decorated with pine boughs and homemade ornaments, and Olivia threw herself into preparing special holiday treats with the limited ingredients available. 2 days before Christmas, a supply wagon made it through from Mill Creek despite the snow-choked trails. Along with necessary provisions came mail and packages that had accumulated in town. To Olivia's surprise, there was a small parcel addressed to her, a late response to the letter she had sent to her aunt in Boston shortly after Thomas's death. The package contained a few small gifts: a hand-knitted cap and mittens for James, a lace handkerchief for Olivia, and a brief note expressing condolences and offering financial assistance should Olivia wish to return east. The kindness was genuine, but the underlying message was clear. A proper widow with a child should not remain in the wild territories alone. Olivia tucked the letter away, grateful for the gifts but certain that her future, whatever it might hold, lay in the West. Boston, with its rigid social hierarchies and stifling propriety, felt like another lifetime now. On Christmas Eve, Regina insisted on hosting a proper dinner in the main house for all the hands who hadn't gone to town for the holiday. Olivia spent the day cooking with Regina's help, preparing a feast that, while simple by Eastern standards, represented luxury on the frontier: roast beef, preserved fruit, fresh bread, and even a molasses cake for dessert. The evening was filled with stories, laughter, and even some music when one of the older hands produced a fiddle and another a harmonica. James was passed from lap to lap, clearly enjoying the attention and activity, especially when Finn held him. Later, after most of the men had returned to the bunkhouse and James was finally asleep, Olivia found herself alone with Finn on the porch, wrapped in a warm shawl against the cold. The night was clear, stars brilliant above the snow-covered landscape. "I have something for you," Finn said suddenly, producing a small package from his coat pocket. "It's not much, but—" Touched by the unexpected gesture, Olivia carefully unwrapped the simple brown paper to reveal a small wooden carving of a horse and rider. The craftsmanship was remarkable in its detail, the tiny figure captured mid-gallop. "It's beautiful," she breathed, turning it in her hands to admire the workmanship. "Did you make this?" Finn nodded, a hint of embarrassment coloring his features. "Something to pass the time during winter evenings. I thought James might like it when he's older, a toy that won't break easily." The thoughtfulness of the gift, practical yet personal, moved her deeply. "I have something for you as well," she admitted, pulling a small wrapped object from her pocket. His surprise was evident as he accepted the package and carefully unwrapped a knitted scarf in a deep blue that matched his eyes. "I noticed your old one was nearly worn through," Olivia explained, suddenly shy. "The wool came from Regina's stores. She helped me choose the color." Finn ran his fingers over the soft wool, clearly moved by the simple gift. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It's been a long time since anyone's made something just for me." In the silence that followed, standing close beneath the winter stars, Olivia became acutely aware of how much Finn Porter had come to mean to her in the short months of their acquaintance. It wasn't just gratitude for his help when she most needed it, though that remained. It was something deeper, a recognition of shared values, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding that needed no words to convey. Yet guilt surged immediately after the realization. Thomas had been dead barely 2 months. What kind of woman developed feelings for another man so quickly after losing her husband? As if sensing her inner conflict, Finn stepped back slightly, his expression careful. "It's getting late," he said gently, "and tomorrow will be a busy day." Olivia nodded, grateful for his perception and restraint. "Good night, Finn. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Olivia," he replied, his eyes conveying more than his measured words before he turned and walked toward the bunkhouse, the new scarf already wrapped around his neck. Winter gradually gave way to spring, the snow retreating inch by inch to reveal muddy ground beneath. As April brought the first wildflowers peeking through the remaining patches of snow, Olivia found herself facing the decision she had been postponing: whether to return to her homestead or remain at the Double R. Regina had made it clear that Olivia's position as cook was secure for as long as she wanted it. The arrangement had worked well for everyone. The ranch hands were happy with their meals. James had thrived in the stable environment, and Olivia had saved a modest sum from her wages. Yet Thomas's dream pulled at her conscience. The homestead represented his vision, his final gift to her and James. Could she simply abandon it? Finn, who had been away on ranch business for several days, found her one evening sitting on a bench outside the main house, deep in thought as she watched the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson. "Heavy thoughts?" he asked, settling beside her at a respectful distance. Olivia sighed. "Just considering options. Spring's here and I need to decide about the homestead." Finn nodded, understanding immediately. "What's your heart telling you?" "That's the problem," she admitted. "My heart is divided. Part of me feels I owe it to Thomas to try making the homestead work. Another part recognizes the practical challenges of doing so alone with a baby." She paused, then added softly, and part of me has found unexpected contentment here. Finn was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully measured. What if there was another option? Olivia turned to look at him, curious. What do you mean? He seemed to choose his next words with deliberate care. I've been saving for a place of my own. Not as big as the Double R, but decent grazing land about 15 miles east of here. Regina's agreed to sell me a starter herd on favorable terms. Olivia's heart began to beat faster, though she wasn't entirely sure why. You're leaving the Double R. Not immediately. It'll take time to build a cabin, get things established. He paused, then turned to face her directly. Olivia, I know it may be too soon. Your grief is still fresh and you have James to consider above all else, but I want you to know that I care deeply for you both. If someday, when you're ready, you might consider. He trailed off, uncharacteristically uncertain, understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. He was offering a future not immediate, not presumptuous, but a possibility when she was ready. Finn, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything now, he assured her quickly. I just wanted you to know that whatever you decide about the homestead, you're not alone, whether as a friend or something more when the time is right. The simple declaration, delivered without pressure or expectation, touched Olivia deeply. Here was a man who understood loss and patience, who offered support without demanding immediate reciprocation. Thank you, she said softly, meeting his gaze directly. That means more than I can express right now. Finn nodded, accepting her response without pushing for more. They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky, each contemplating futures that suddenly held new possibilities. 2 weeks later, Olivia rode out with Finn and 2 other ranch hands to visit her homestead for the first time since winter's onset. James, now nearly 7 months old, was securely strapped to her back in a modified Indian cradle board that Regina had helped her fashion. As they crested the final hill and the small cabin came into view, Olivia was struck by conflicting emotions. The homestead looked smaller and more vulnerable than she remembered, yet it still represented Thomas's dreams and their brief life together. The cabin had weathered the winter reasonably well, though one window shutter had been torn loose by wind, and the vegetable garden was now a tangle of weeds. Inside, everything remained as she had left it, preserved in the cold, dry air of the Montana winter. While the men checked the outbuildings and rounded up the chickens that had somehow survived the winter, Olivia walked alone to Thomas's grave on the small hill behind the cabin. The wooden cross she had fashioned still stood, though weathered by snow and wind. I've come back, she said softly to the silent grave, James cooing on her back. Though not as I expected to, so much has changed, Thomas, she knelt, brushing away dead leaves that had collected against the cross. James is growing strong. He has your determination, already trying to crawl everywhere, exploring his world. A gentle breeze stirred the new grass sprouting around the grave. I think you would want us to be happy, to be safe, to build a good life, even if it's not exactly the one we planned together. The simple act of speaking aloud brought unexpected clarity. Thomas had loved her, had wanted the best for her and their child. He wouldn't have wanted her to cling to an untenable situation out of misguided loyalty. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that it was Finn. He stopped a respectful distance away, waiting silently until she rose to her feet. I've made my decision, she said, turning to face him. I want to sell the homestead. There's a young couple in Mill Creek looking to start out. Regina mentioned them. They'd make good use of what Thomas built here. Finn nodded, his expression careful. You're sure? Yes, Olivia said with newfound certainty. Thomas's dream was for us to build a life together here. Without him, it's just land and a cabin. The dream has to change. Understanding filled Finn's blue eyes. And what's the new dream? Olivia smiled softly. I'm still discovering that, but I know it includes James growing up somewhere safe with people who care for him. It includes meaningful work and a community. She paused, then added more tentatively, And perhaps when the time is right, it includes someone who understands that Thomas will always be part of our story but not the end of it. Finn's expression warmed with hope. I'd like to be part of that story, Olivia, when you're ready. I think, she said carefully, that I'm beginning to be ready, not for everything at once, but for possibilities. It was enough. More than enough for now. Finn offered his hand, and she took it as they walked back down the hill toward the cabin, James babbling happily on her back. The future stretched before them, not certain, not guaranteed, but full of promise nonetheless. Summer brought significant changes to Olivia's life. The homestead sold quickly to a young couple from Minnesota, providing her with enough funds to feel secure about her future choices. She continued working as the double Artiques cook, but now with the understanding that it was by choice rather than necessity. James celebrated his first birthday in August with a small gathering at the ranch. He was walking now, unsteadily but with determination, and had developed a special attachment to Finn, who delighted in teaching him new words and simple games. Olivia's relationship with Finn had developed gradually, with the respect and caution that their circumstances demanded. They were rarely alone together. Propriety still mattered, even on the frontier, but they found moments to talk during daily tasks, and Finn often joined her and Regina for evenings in the main house. As summer waned into early autumn, Finn's own plans began taking more concrete shape. He purchased the land he had mentioned, and construction began on a modest cabin with the help of several double R hands during their off hours. Olivia occasionally rode out with James to see the progress, each visit making the potential future there seem more tangible. One crisp September afternoon, Finn invited her to ride out to the property alone. Regina happily offered to watch James, her knowing smile suggesting she understood the significance of the invitation. The land Finn had chosen was beautiful, a small valley with a clear creek running through it, sheltered by low hills that would provide protection from the worst winter winds. The cabin was nearly complete now, a solid structure of logs and stone with a proper chimney and glass windows, a luxury Olivia hadn't expected. "It's wonderful, Finn," she said sincerely as they dismounted near the porch. "You've created something special here." Pride was evident in his face as he led her inside. The interior was simple but well crafted, with a main room that would serve as kitchen and living area and two small bedrooms. A stone hearth dominated one wall, and the windows allowed ample light. "It's not fancy," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "But it's solid. Room to expand later if needed." The implication hung in the air between them. This wasn't just a bachelor's cabin, it was designed with a family in mind. "Finn," Olivia began, suddenly certain of what she wanted to say. "It's been almost a year since Thomas died, a year of grief and change and unexpected blessings." She turned to face him directly. "You've been patient and respectful, never pushing but always supporting. I want you to know that I'm ready now, ready to think about a future together, if that's still what you want." The joy that spread across his weathered face was answer enough, but his words confirmed it. "It's what I've wanted since that day I found you standing by Thomas's grave with James in your arms, not to replace what you lost, but to build something new alongside you." He took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. "I love you, Olivia Reed, you and James both. I want to be a father to him, a husband to you if you'll have me." Tears blurred Olivia's vision, but they were tears of happiness rather than grief. "Yes," she said simply, "we would be honored to build a life with you, Finn Porter." He kissed her then, a first kiss that held both tenderness and promise. When they parted, Olivia felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Thomas would always be part of her past, the father of her son, her first love, but Finn was her future, an unexpected gift in the midst of loss. "When?" Finn asked, still holding her close. "I don't want to rush you, but I've waited a lifetime to find you," Olivia smiled, touching his face gently. "The cabin will be ready by month's end, you said. Perhaps then, a simple ceremony with Regina and the hands as witnesses." "Perfect," Finn agreed, his eyes alight with happiness. "Though I should probably speak with the minister in Mill Creek first, make it all proper and legal. The practical consideration made Olivia laugh with unexpected lightness. It was so characteristic of Finn, thoughtful, responsible, always considering the details that would protect those he cared for. They rode back to the Double R as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the plains. The future that had seemed so uncertain a year ago now stretched before them with newfound clarity, not without challenges, certainly, but rich with promise and shared purpose. Regina was waiting on the porch when they returned, James happily playing at her feet with wooden blocks. One look at their faces told her all she needed to know. "Well," she said with satisfaction, "it's about time. I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other until James was old enough to call you on it." Olivia blushed, but Finn just laughed, dismounting and lifting James into his arms with practiced ease. The boy's delighted giggle as Finn swung him up warmed Olivia's heart. They were already a family in all the ways that mattered most. "We're thinking the end of the month," Finn told Regina as Olivia joined them. "Nothing fancy," Regina snorted. "Fancy isn't practical out here, but proper is important, and you'll do it proper or I'll have something to say about it." Her stern tone was belied by the genuine warmth in her eyes. "I'll have the boys clean up the bunkhouse for a proper celebration afterward." Plans came together quickly over the following weeks. The minister from Mill Creek agreed to ride out for the ceremony, and Regina insisted on ordering a proper wedding dress from the mercantile for Olivia, overriding her protests that her Sunday best would suffice. "It's not every day I get to see someone I care about start a new life," the older woman declared firmly. "Let an old woman have her fussing." 2 days before the wedding, a surprise visitor arrived at the Double R. Finn's youngest sister, Caroline, escorted by one of the ranch's hands who had been sent to meet her stagecoach in Mill Creek. At 20, she was a feminine version of Finn, with the same striking blue eyes and direct manner. "I couldn't miss my only brother's wedding," she explained after enthusiastic embraces. "Mother and the others send their love, but harvest season makes travel impossible for them." Caroline and Olivia formed an immediate bond, staying up late into the night talking while Finn was banished to the bunkhouse for the final days before the wedding. Having someone from Finn's family present made the occasion feel even more significant, a true blending of their separate lives into something new. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, a perfect late September morning. Olivia stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. The dress Regina had ordered was simple but elegant cream-colored cotton with delicate lace trim at the collar and cuffs. Caroline had arranged Olivia's hair with wildflowers, and James, resplendent in a new outfit sewn by Regina's capable hands, sat on the bed watching his mother with wide eyes. "You look beautiful," Caroline said softly from the doorway. "Finn won't know what hit him." Olivia smiled, lifting James into her arms. "I never expected this," she confessed. "After Thomas died, I thought that chapter of my life was closed forever. Finding love again seemed impossible." "Life has a way of surprising us," Caroline replied, straightening James's small collar. Finn never thought he'd settle down either. After Mary married Robert, he seemed resigned to the trail. Mother worried he'd never find his place. She met Olivia's eyes directly. "But he's found it with you and James. I've never seen him so centered, so at peace." A knock at the door interrupted them. Regina entered, looking uncharacteristically formal in a dark blue dress Olivia had never seen before. "It's time," she announced. "Everyone's gathered in the yard. Finn looks like he might jump out of his skin with impatience." The three women shared a laugh, the sound mixing with James's happy babble. Then, with a deep breath, Olivia stepped out to meet her future. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. The ranch hands had created an arbor of autumn branches and late wildflowers, under which the minister waited with Finn. The double Articus employees were arranged in a half-circle, freshly shaved and wearing their Sunday best, an unusual sight that almost made Olivia smile despite her nervousness. But when her eyes met Finn's, everything else faded away. He stood tall and straight in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his expression a mixture of awe and absolute certainty as he watched her approach with James in her arms. The minister's words washed over her promises of faithfulness and companionship, of shared burdens and joys. When it came time for the vows, Finn's voice was steady and sure, his hand warm around hers. "I take you, Olivia, to be my wife," he said, the simple traditional words carrying the weight of his heart's commitment. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When it was her turn, Olivia's voice trembled slightly, but her conviction was just as strong. This was right. This was where she and James belonged. After the exchange of simple gold bands, another of Regina's insistences, the minister pronounced them husband and wife. Finn's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, mindful of James still in Olivia's arms and their audience of smiling ranch hands. "Mrs. Porter," he whispered as they separated, his eyes alight with joy. "Mr. Porter," she returned, her own happiness bubbling up like a spring. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Olivia had experienced. The bunkhouse had been transformed with more autumn decorations, tables laden with food she had helped prepare the previous day, and even a small band consisting of the musically inclined ranch hands. There was dancing, storytelling, and more genuine good wishes than Olivia had ever received in Boston society. As evening approached, Regina took charge of James, insisting that the newlyweds should have their first night alone in their new home. "The cabin's ready," she informed them, James already contentedly settled on her hip. "I've had the boys stock it with everything you'll need. Now go before it gets too dark to travel safely." With heartfelt thanks and promises to return for James the following afternoon, Olivia and Finn mounted their horses for the ride to what was now their home. The journey passed in comfortable conversation and occasional companionable silence, both aware of the significant step they had taken, but neither feeling the need to fill every moment with words. The cabin welcomed them as the sun set, already feeling like home with the small touches Olivia had added over the previous week's curtains at the windows, a handmade quilt on the bed, Thomas's rocking chair by the hearth. Finn had ensured everything was perfect, from the stocked pantry to the fire already laid in the fireplace, ready to be lit. As night fell fully over the Montana plains, they stood together on the porch, Finn's arm around Olivia's waist as they gazed at the star-filled sky. "Happy?" he asked softly, his breath warm against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible again," she replied honestly. "It feels like coming home even though we've never lived here before." Finn turned her gently to face him, his expression serious in the starlight. "Home isn't just a place," he said. "It's where you belong, and we belong together, Olivia, you, me, and James." As he kissed her beneath the vast Montana sky, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that he was right. From the depths of grief had come an unexpected joy, a second chance at happiness that honored the past while embracing the future. She was no longer the woman standing alone by a grave with a baby in her arms. She was loved, supported, and facing life's journey with a partner who understood both her strength and her vulnerability. Together, they stepped into their new home and closed the door on the night, ready to begin the next chapter of their shared story. Epilogue. 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter filled the yard as Olivia watched from the porch, one hand resting on her swollen belly. James, now 6 and sturdy as a young colt, was teaching his 3-year-old sister Emma how to rope the wooden practice calf Finn had carved for him. Their faces were alight with concentration and joy, so similar to their father's expression when he was focused on a task. 5 years had transformed the modest homestead into a thriving small ranch. The cabin had been expanded twice, first to add a proper kitchen and larger main room, then to create additional bedrooms as their family grew. A sturdy barn housed their growing herd of horses, Finn having discovered a talent for breeding and training that complemented the cattle operation. Their cattle business remained small compared to the Double R, but it was profitable and steadily growing. Regina had become a trusted advisor and frequent visitor, her gruff affection for the Porter children belying her reputation as the territory's toughest ranch owner. The sound of hoofbeats drew Olivia's attention to the trail leading from the main road. Finn appeared over the rise, returning from his trip to Mill Creek for supplies. The children abandoned their game immediately, racing toward their father with excited shouts. Olivia smiled as she watched Finn dismount and scoop Emma up, while simultaneously admiring the rope James proudly displayed. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of him with their children still filled her heart with a profound gratitude. "Careful now," Finn cautioned as James demonstrated his roping technique. "That's right, just like I showed you. You'll be helping with the real calves before you know it." He looked up and caught Olivia's eye, his smile warming as he set Emma down and approached the porch. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his hand gently covering hers on her rounded belly. "Wonderful," she replied truthfully. "Dr. Simpson says another month, but I think this little one might be eager to join us sooner." Finn's eyes crinkled with pleasure. Just like his mama, always in a hurry to get things done. "Or her papa, never content to wait when there's work to be tackled," Olivia countered with a laugh. They had built a good life together, not without challenges, but rich with shared purpose and deep love. The grief that had once seemed insurmountable had softened with time into a gentle remembrance. Thomas's photograph still held a place of honor in their home, and James knew the stories of the father who had loved him in his earliest days. But life had moved forward, as it must. The Porter Ranch was becoming known for its fine horses and quality cattle, and Finn and Olivia were respected members of the growing community. They had weathered harsh winters, dry summers, and all the uncertainties of frontier life together, emerging stronger with each challenge overcome. "Letter came for you," Finn said, producing an envelope from his jacket pocket. "From your aunt in Boston." Olivia took it with interest. Her correspondence with her Eastern relatives had become infrequent but cordial over the years. They had never fully understood her choice to remain in Montana territory, but they had eventually accepted it. "She's probably responding to the news about the baby," Olivia said, setting the letter aside to read later. "Last time she hinted rather strongly that we should consider sending James east for proper schooling when the time comes." Finn snorted softly. "And what did you tell her?" "That our children are receiving an education in things that matter: hard work, honesty, compassion alongside their reading and figures." Olivia smiled at the memory of penning that particular response. "And that you're teaching James mathematics through carpentry and horse breeding that would impress any Boston schoolmaster." Finn laughed, sitting beside her on the porch step. "I'm not sure about that, but he's sharp as a tack, our boy." He watched as James returned to teaching Emma, his patience with his younger sister a source of parental pride. "They're going to be fine, Olivia, all of them. We're giving them roots and wings both." "Yes," she agreed softly, "we are." As the autumn sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long golden light across their land, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a grief-stricken widow, standing alone by a grave with her baby in her arms, to a woman surrounded by family and purpose. It was a transformation she could never have imagined in those dark days after Thomas's death. Finn's hand found hers, his calloused fingers entwining with her own in a gesture so familiar and comforting it needed no words. They sat together in companionable silence, watching their children play in the fading light, the future stretching before them with continued promise and possibility. When James and Emma finally tired of their game and ran to join their parents on the porch, Olivia opened her arms to embrace them, her heart full to overflowing. This was her life now, not the one she had planned, but the one she had built with love and courage from the ashes of loss. "Story, Mama?" Emma asked, climbing onto her lap as carefully as a 3-year-old could manage around her mother's pregnant belly. "Yes," James agreed eagerly, settling against Finn's side. "Tell the one about how you and Papa met." Finn's eyes met Olivia's over their children's heads, a lifetime of shared understanding in that single glance. "That's a good story," he said softly. Olivia nodded, drawing her family closer as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "It begins on a rainy day," she started, her voice gentle with memory, "when I was standing by your grandpa Thomas's grave with your brother in my arms. And then a cowboy rode out of the mist and said something I'll never forget." "You're not alone anymore," James finished triumphantly, having heard the story many times before. "That's right," Olivia confirmed, reaching for Finn's hand once more, "and he was right, I never was again.